fact, that was part of the conversation this morning about the PPEs and the supplies and funding for it. As FEMA, the national organization, are making some changes to their own rules and regulation. So we are trying to manage what's happening in the context, plus the demand that is needed at the school. And Assistant Superintendent Tanaka talked about the burn rate, right? How often, well, how much is needed on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? And can we get a metric around that so that we are advancing those supplies to the school in such a way that they're receiving it before they need it? Some of them in the discussion with Haima this morning was about, are there shelf life expiration that we need to be careful about? Those are the types of conversations we're having, right? It's not just about like just stockpile it at the school so we don't have to worry about them anymore, but we also have to look at the shelf life of any of our things that we're using. And so I just want to be able to talk about the fact that there are people they are the chief warriors around this. They're looking at the data. They're in constant communication, not only with our partners, but with the schools themselves. And so any concerns about this, we do need to know, because it is data that helps us to mitigate much more accurately where the challenges are. And it is not to say that one school is not doing it right over another school. We recognize that the challenges of how fast things can get to the school, how long, how they can store it at the school, how the burn rate, what the burn rate looks like at a particular school, are all data that we need in order to make sure that we're adjusting that correctly. And in some cases, the only way we're going to get that information is by having those experiences and modeling those experiences in such a way that we start to create a formula that helps us to predict more clearly what the needs of the school, a particular school is. We have to be in session in order to be able to do that. We are guesstimating at this point in time, and over time, we should be able to get much more accurate. Then I want to turn it over to Assistant Armstrong, because the specific question that you had, Chair Payne, around special education is an important one, and I'm asking her to respond to that.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, good afternoon, Chair Payne and board members. And if I'm understanding the question correctly, the question is, how are we ensuring that we have the proper protective equipment for our staff who serves students with unique needs? Is that the question on the floor?
That's part of my question, because what we're hearing in the testimony is that already there are people who are saying, and it's not just our teachers, but educational assistants too, who are not adequately given the kinds of protective equipment they need for the close contact work that they're doing with these particular students. So there's that. And so when you say we're going to reopen more and we need to have more information about what's needed, we already have these fully self-contained high need students in our schools. So it seems like that information should be available now. But in addition to that, other issues with special needs students who may be coming back to school, but who have behavioral issues perhaps that make it necessary for them to have people with them on campus, which makes for larger numbers of people in a classroom. We've heard from people testifying about that it's not just the number of students, but it's all the aides that have to be with those students. So these are things that I think have to be thought about really carefully and planned for, to assure both our teachers and our families that we are doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you, Chair Payne. Thank you for that clarification. And yes, I think you mentioned earlier that our staff who do work with students who have unique needs and may require lack of physical distancing, actually hand over hand instruction, bodily care, whether it be feeding or changing, etc. Additional protective equipment is necessary. And what I noted earlier from the conversation is when we are looking at inserting things in our health and safety guidelines and in our principals handbook, that information, that additional protective equipment is not listed. We do have memos that have gone out to the field several times. We also have training videos and professional development modules that address these. But I think it would behoove us to put that information from those memos and professional development into our documents that are available to all so that there is clarification on what is expected when we do have our staff working with students with unique needs. As far as the reopening and how do we ensure or how do we decide who is ready and who's not, I know that there are three key considerations that must be discussed and addressed in addition to COVID case thresholds or numbers of cases in an area. And those three conditions are, we have to consider the operations, the personnel, and the facilities. And going back to your cleaning question, do we have enough custodial staff to allow more students onto our campus? Or how many students can we allow back on the campus with the staff, with the cleaning staff that we have, that will ensure that the health and safety practices are adhered to. In addition, what is how are our personnel following the masking requirements? And while we do have the stringent requirements, you have mentioned that there's been testimony where people have reported that some staff members are not adhering to that. So while one, we need to take corrective action on that, but two, that would be a consideration if the school is not able to have their staff maintain that. That's another criteria that would need to be considered prior to allowing more students on campus. And then the third is the facilities. And I think the deputy mentioned this before, our schools are all different sizes, even the configuration of the room or the size of the room matters, and how many students and adults can be at that room and adhere to the health and safety guidelines that we have before us. I did look at our most vulnerable population, are medically fragile, and they're fully self-contained. Most of them are fully self-contained. Regarding the statement or the concerns that there are so many adults and students in the classroom, we have 326 students who are in medically fragile classrooms. So I took the two highest numbers, and it was from two high schools where we have 11 students and 3 teachers in a room. So that's 15. And then we have 2 skilled nurses, 7 speech, 6 PT, and 5 OT, 5 occupational therapists. So we had to dig a little deeper, and it came out that out of the 11 students who were in that classroom, 6 had opted for distance learning or they were learning from home. So I think the numbers, and it is true, a lot of times we have many adults in these classrooms, but when these concerns come up, they should be immediately brought to the principal, if no action is taken, to the complex area superintendent, because we don't want we don't want health and safety, too many adults and children in a room where it's deemed there's a health and safety concern. And I think especially at this time when we have so many students who are not in school, we do have many options and we do have many spaces on campus to address this problem. So when I'm looking at the numbers, I think it behooves a closer look in what is the size of the room, and are these people actually in school at this time, and is it a safe situation or not? And if it's not, we need to address it immediately. But we can't do that when we have the blanket statements that don't specify the where so that we can look into it.
Okay, so I guess what I would like to know is what you just described, is that part of the criteria in writing that is considered when schools are planning for reopening? Do they have to document what's going on with respect to those particular classes of students?
Yeah. And the criteria, meaning the operations, the personnel, and the facilities, which would include that.
Yes, whatever is expected by the department for schools to have in place before they begin to transition out of distance learning, is that a piece of that they have to document how they're managing that with respect to all of the things we talked about?
And Deputy Unabasami, with work with the leadership team, has put together a draft of core assumptions that we are to follow as we transition from distance learning to a blended hybrid or a full face-to-face model. And included in the core assumptions, this is explicitly stated.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a question or have a comment? Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Member Takeno here. I think we may have gone a little off the motion that was in front of us. So can we go back and take a look at that? And where we are in adopting, I know there was some hesitation on items 12 and 13, but other than that, would the other guidance or the other statements in there be ready for a vote?
I made some notes in addition to that. Number 6, and because we don't have any amendments yet, but I'm just making notes as we did before. Number 6, Phyllis spoke to the need for approval from respective CAS as opposed to notification. In number 7, 1 week was suggested it be 2 weeks. Up in number 3, and this we heard not only from our discussion, but also from testimony, recognizing that 6-foot distance for high-end special education students is not realistic. But paired with that is the kind of support that we give to the staff. So that I saw as a change. We also had a suggested change early on in the proposed motion from Board Member Fallon, inserting the words that would make the direct the department to continue to make changes as new information is given to us. So I heard that, and the other 12 and 13 was difficult because we can't control the feedback from the Department of Health. And number 12, there was discussion about whether we want to tell schools to put on the brakes right now when they've already started moving forward, even if they have not identified the the ability to address the criteria in the DOH guidelines that have not been fully implemented into the Department of Education's expectations. So that's a lot, but I see Deputy Unibasami, your hand is up. Do you want to add anything here?
I do. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay.
If I can also add recommendation number 8, in discussion with the superintendents, the CASs, is that the 4-week period, they talked about, yes, they do not want to pivot their schools so often that people are having to change the model over and over again. However, they did describe several cases in which they may want to temporarily move to they might be in hybrid, may want to move to distance learning for a week or two because they are worried about a possible exposure, but find out that there was no exposure. But what this line does is it closes the school facilities for a whole month, when they actually would be able to bring the model back that they were at earlier. But now, so it might take them a couple of days, but because of this line here, they're worried about that by making that principal making that choice would now put that model, would prohibit them bringing the students and staff back earlier. I hope I made sense in that. And I'm just asking the board to take a look at that, the language on recommendation 8.
Okay, board members, any thoughts on that? Board member Voss?
Just one thing, I want to go back to the deputy superintendent's comments about number 5 and the words must demonstrate. I think, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, I think what she was saying was that she wasn't, and her people weren't quite sure what that means, must demonstrate, and I confess I don't know what it means either. So deputy superintendent, were you thinking that that should say something more like, rather than saying must demonstrate, she'll say something like, shall present to their complex area superintendent their school's plan to, and go on, adequately implement. Is that something that you were thinking of, or were you suggesting other language?
Yes, and know that as we finish up the drafts on the core assumptions and the tools that go alongside of it, that we started to articulate some of the ways in which we can demonstrate. And I said that verbally to you, to the board, just to give you an idea of how we were thinking about it. Because it was okay, how do we demonstrate this? And as I read it to you, read you the list, did you find that satisfactory, or was it lacking in something? And that was my question. Yes.
Okay, so my question, another question coming in, and board member Voss, feel free to jump right in, but does using the words must demonstrate really leave it open to some flexibility for the department to have various ways, rather than for us to specify a specific actions such as providing their plan to their complex superintendent? Does the words that are there give you more flexibility?
Sorry, are you talking to me or to board
Yes,
members?
I
Oh, to
well,
me?
you, and then because I heard from board member Voss that he provided more specific guidance there, but then when I listened to you, I heard you say there are various ways that that could be demonstrated, and so is it more appropriate in your mind for the board to leave the language as it is, because it does give you more flexibility?
I think if it stays the way it is, and we are able to share with you the ways in which schools are demonstrating it, sharing examples. For instance, I know that in the testimonies from our schools and CASs, invitation to visit and to see. So in other words, you're not just looking at documents, but you're actually it's being demonstrated, right? I mean, that those are the ways that we're thinking about how do you demonstrate is not just by sending out another report, but actually inviting people to come in and look at the operations of a particular school. Of course, social distancing and staying safe, but to see what that looks like. So for us, must demonstrate means many different things, and we absolutely can create the specs for it and share it. And then the question that we would have is really receiving validation from the board that you find these acceptable. Um, and I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I'll go to Board Member Voss first to see if you have any follow-up on that, and then Board Member Takeno.
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Voss. My point, my consistent point, is that I do not want us to create barriers or delays to schools reopening who have a plan. And if the department believes that the words demonstrate is sufficiently clear that they can promptly and timely give the go-ahead to schools that have demonstrated that, I'm okay with it. Oh, yeah, Chair.
Thank you. Board Member Takeno. Board Member Takeno, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Payne. So to Assistant Superintendent Unibasami Wood, on item 8, we remove the word potentially. So it would be direct response to confirmed or imminent COVID-19 spread. Because what you're saying is that if it's not a danger, then it takes the flexibility away from the 4 weeks. So if you take out potentially, now it is confirmed and it's imminent that it is spreading. So would taking away that word of vagueness where it's potentially suit what you're looking for?
I think that would help. And there's another scenario to add to it is like, I also think it's important to, in listening to the testimonies is that we're not pivoting so quickly to bringing more and more kids back to school that we're creating conditions in which we have not acclimated to the volume of people on the campus, right? So we wouldn't want to see, I mean, the worst case scenario is every day we're shifting the meter to a higher level of students on campus. What I saw number 8 suggesting or recommending is that there is time for the transitioning phase to settle in, people be able to get used to that as we add, and that the 4 week or whatever that cadence is going to be is thoughtfully planned out, but it's not done at I always say microwave pace, that we're not able to adjust and monitor to see if there are any impacts that we should be mitigating before we move to the next stage, right? So I number 8 was something that gave some assurances that there would be time for staff, for the leaders and the community to adjust to the different reopening phases of the school moving forward, keeping the safety and health conditions as an important priority.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. Other board members' comments, please? So are we, so removing potentially from that, so it reads response to confirmed or imminent COVID-19 spread is more appropriate. Are there other comments? I know we need to get back to number 12 because that's kind of the really big issue here, because the reality is there hasn't been an opportunity to have documentation on things that are not yet formally considered. I'm wondering, Phyllis, do you have documentation, do you have an expectation for the schools that have turned in their plans that they have documented their preparation or their already success at addressing the Department of Health guidelines for blended learning, for example, which has a whole checklist in the Department of Health guidelines concerning masking and distancing and all of that stuff. So are the schools explaining how they're going to take care of that in each one of their plans?
I do believe that when there was as the CASs are working with their schools, that these are conversations that are happening. The documentation piece of this, in listening to the board's discussion, is helping to set an expectation that we do want some written documentation that we can keep for historical records. And I can see good value in that. And so the level to which we ask for the documentation, where it's kept and how that information is used is part of our discussion as we move forward. As I said before, we have been in conversations about what we will hold to universally across all of our schools, where we need to give flexibility because of the unique needs and resources at the school. And so as a result, my thinking is that we do want to make clear how the decisions are being made, and be able to record it, and then take a look at what would it take to even move to the next phase, right? And my hope is that somewhere down the line, we're actually forecasting that, not only for our school staff, but also for the community, so that there is a sense of what the planning that the leaders are already doing, being able to share that in such a way that it brings confidence that our leaders are the first people who are thinking about it and worrying about it and planning for it already. And I do think the documentation will help.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. Board members? Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Board Chair Payne. Board Member Takeno here. May I offer maybe a suggestion on 12 that would state schools may change its instructional delivery mode to hybrid or in-person when the superintendent incorporates. So when it's all developed, they can review all these plans and then determine whether or not they should change it.
Comments from other board members on that suggestion? And feel free, Phyllis, do you have a thought on that too?
I'm looking at it again. I'm sorry. Can we repeat it so I can write it? I'm so sorry.
Okay, let me, I think probably the most controversial of all of the things that we have in this motion is number 12, which speaks to that no instructional delivery mode can be changed right now, which is it doesn't mean that we take out the hubs, and it doesn't mean that we don't have our medically fragile kids on campus, but no changes for second quarter, basically, until the superintendent incorporates the board's directives into the reopening plan, the principal handbook, or the health and safety handbook, and that includes the health metrics. And I know there's still a lack of sureness on what those are going to be. So comments from board members. Board Member Takeno, did I get that correct before I move to anybody else?
Yes, I have further comments.
Okay, Board Member Cox?
Again, I'm going to repeat that our complex was following the guidance that they had. And so every single elementary school has already put on their website, contacted their parents, getting surveys on how many want to continue with their virtual learning with their kids, and how many are going to be wanting to come back to school in an A-B hybrid. So now you're going to tell them, you're trying to put something in place that says these people didn't think about all of the kinds of things they needed to keep the kids in the schools safe. So I don't think that this is helpful to push back schools that have already, schools and complexes, and I don't think Kauai is the only one. And even though Kauai only has had 2 positive cases, the CAS has been in contact with the mayor. Kauai is a different kind of place. People all talk and work together. So however you're going to state this, you're going to be forcing Kauai to back up, go back, tell parents, oh, sorry, the board says we can't do this now. We have to wait some more. And so this is just adding more confusion to an already confusing kind of situation. So I say that you're punishing schools that have been working really hard and trying to do everything to make sure that their students come back to school in a safe manner. So I am not in favor of trying to say that these schools can't continue on their plans. On Kauai, all of our secondary schools are staying virtual, but it's our elementary schools that have plans, and each one is not necessarily like the other schools. Some are phasing it in because some of our schools are really, really small, so they know what they're doing. The CAS knows. I've been invited to go visit classrooms to see how it is that they're doing those things. So I don't want my schools to be punished. I yield.
Okay, well, Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Board Chair. I believe that the suggested amendment addresses Board Member Maggie Cox's concern, because we're not punishing anybody. We're just giving them the flexibility that when the superintendent incorporates the board's directives, then they may change their instructional or delivery mode to hybrid or in person. So they can continue as noted, and then when the guidance comes out, they look at the guidance, and if they can fulfill the guidance, then they can continue. I yield the floor.
Okay, Board Member Cox or Board Member Voss, go ahead, and then Board Member.
So the question is, Phyllis, can the guidance come out? Because our schools are saying October 12 is when they're wanting to start things. Can the guidance come out by then? Or are you going to tell us all to stop?
I am not telling all of them to stop, because our core assumptions are that the CASs and the principals are leading this, using the information that we have stated, and the shared agreements around the commitments. And I do want to say that I also want to make it clear that getting clear about, at a leadership level, about what are our shared agreements, so that we are unified in what our language is then it's important that we're also talking with our partners, the unions, to make sure that they are aware of the different changes and the way we're thinking about the planning and so forth. So when we look at something like incorporating language into our different documents, it's important that people understand, whether it's an employee, or someone who's supporting the employee, to understand what that language means. So please know that it is not just a matter of wordsmithing and putting something into the documents. that it is a much larger endeavor than that. And when we're talking about 3 significant unions, it is a significant task. So by October 12th, if this language goes in as understood right now, it would cause a problem, I believe, for our some of our schools. And my question then to the board is that what is the intention of the board? Because that's the reality of the work that we're doing.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. Bruce Voss, Board Member Voss.
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Voss. I have serious reservations about whether this proposal is appropriate for a board in the first place. But if we are going to go forward, in my view, number 12 has to come out for the reasons that Maggie just said and the Deputy Superintendent. And I want to focus on what the language of this is. No school may change an instructional delivery mode. And you go down until the superintendent incorporates the board's directives. We need to understand, we are the one creating this barrier. It's these directives that we're passing that are blocking these schools, like those schools on Kauai that have worked so hard, other schools on Oahu, to develop good plans to reopen in some safe, incremental way. And again, that's just not what we should be doing. So in my view, if we're going to pass this, we need to delete both 12 and 13.
Okay. Any other Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Member Takano here. I guess I'm pleased to hear that Assistant Superintendent Unibasami understands the contractual and legal requirements that they have to the unions, because that has been a main point of contention. For failure to adhere to the contract as well as the statutory requirements for consultation. So understanding that and that statement made, I guess I can expect that the department will be held to those standards. So thank you. I yield the floor.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to say something? So what we are saying is that we are going to trust that the department is going to move forward with opening plans that they have established. And we will assume that the CDC, DOH guidance and all categories will be included at some point in the process. And we will, is that what I'm hearing from board members here? I see silence. The only hands raised are people who are attendees, not board members. Okay, I see Board Member Fallon and Board Member Takeno. Board Member Fallon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I can appreciate the need for the schools to move and the fact that they have begun to implement some of the changes. I know in our proposed motion, 1, 2, and 3 specifically apply to direction from DOH, correct? And then the remainder are really more focused on the department and its kuleana. Is that correct?
It's kuleana being to incorporate the health and safety metrics and thresholds.
of 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Okay, thank you. It was more of a question and clarifying.
Okay, Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Chair Payne. I believe that some of the recommendations, while I do acknowledge there are areas such as like number 12 and forgot where my other notes are, but there are some areas upon which there is some concern. I think there was some with 6 or anyway, I believe some of the other points are worth moving forward with. So the recommendation would be to amend the motion to take out some of the caveats and pass the rest through.
So take out some of the numbers, you mean? And just identify which numbers we want to have as our motion?
Correct. So 12 was a issue. Then 8 was to just take out the word potentially. And I believe possibly could move forward the rest. And we could call for a vote.
I heard 13 was also an issue, and some of the language in number 6. First, we're going to have to, this is really convoluted, but we're going to have to vote on the motion that's on the floor. And then we need to amend this if we're going to do that. But I still want to hear from, I see Kamana Bakarse, your hand is up, and also Board Member Fallon.
Hello, Chair. Board Member Bakarsi here. So a lot of great discussion, a lot of great suggestions. We've gone kind of back and forth. It might behoove us to go through one at a time so that we can make sure we got all the different changes and the different suggestions taken into account so that we're all on the same page. And then we can move forward towards voting on it or passing or amending.
Okay, I take that suggestion. Before we do that, I see Board Member Voss. Did you want to add something? No, he took his hand down. Okay.
No, I'm sorry, Chair. I did have my hand up, and I
Okay.
agree with. I think that's a good suggestion by Kaimana, because remember, Chair, you had sort of listed some of the ones, including Deputy Superintendent's comments on 3A and 6, the with collaboration, and hopefully we're deleting 12 and most of 13. But I think we should go, as painful as it is, one by one through this to make sure that we're not blocking and delaying schools.
Okay, before we do that, any other hands up? No, okay. All right. In the proposed motion, this is what I would propose to do. I'm looking for my Robert's Rules advice here, but I think that it's okay for us first, maybe to get this out of the way, is to take a vote on the motion as it stands, and then go back item by item to see whatever revisions that we want to make. Is that okay with everybody? Hearing no objections, seeing no objections. Oh, okay, because we have the motion on the floor right now. Vice Chair Uemura?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Maybe I should just withdraw the motion. That way you don't have to. Yeah.
Okay, is that okay? My advisors over here, I think that's okay. We can withdraw the motion. And do we need this person who seconded it also to withdraw the second, or is that adequate? Let's say it's adequate. All right, so the motion has been withdrawn. We will now look at the proposed motion, and I'll tell you, please feel free to just speak up if my eyes are not on the screen while I'm reading. We have amended the motion in the second line Move to adopt the following positions as the board's directives to the DOE on the use of DOH guidance and its subsequent iterations, and direct the superintendent to incorporate them into the reopening plan, principal handbook, and health and safety handbook as applicable for the 2021 school year. So that's the first change. Then number 1, the learning model parameters in DOH guidance and impact levels from the governor's recovery plan are minimum thresholds, but not the only criteria that allow schools to start considering transitioning from distance learning to hybrid or in-person learning, or from hybrid learning to in-person learning. And then any issues with that? I'm looking for hands. No. Okay, moving to number 2. The learning model parameters in the DOH guidance and the impact levels from the governor's recovery plan do not apply to decisions regarding transitions from in-person learning to hybrid or distance learning, or from hybrid learning to distance learning. And number 3, this is where we needed to incorporate the accommodations for special needs students. It says, regardless of the delivery mode, all schools must and successfully implement and consistently enforce at least 6 feet of physical distance between all individuals on campus at all times, accepting special situations and accommodations for students who require close contact care. Does that, I'm just making this up. So is that language? And feel free to help me, Heidi. I don't hear. And I know that the staff is taking this also, but does that sound right, Phyllis or Heidi?
Aloha, this is Phyllis. So would offer this language that consistent and correct use of masks, which is from CDC, and then in parens, exceptions will be made for staff and students with health conditions or disabilities who may be unable to tolerate the wearing of a face mask.
Okay, so even the first A, I'm looking for language there too. I proposed some, but
Oh, sorry.
But that's fine. And exceptions will be made for. Give me that again. Exceptions for
Right.
B.
No, I went off topic, and so let me pull that back, because that's part of our core exceptions around the masks we use.
But that's
Just so
actually the second part. That's actually B. Consistent enforcement of proper mask wearing, but maybe
Oh,
proper mask wearing would include whatever exceptions we're making for special needs students. The first one where we need to change it is all individuals on campus at all times, the 6 foot. So putting some language there that acknowledges the accommodations for high needs students.
What we talk about is social distancing to the greatest extent possible, because that with understanding that there are times in which caring for and for a student will require closer distance than 6 feet.
So would it be enough then, without putting all of those details, to simply say physical distance, enforce at least 6 feet physical distance between all individuals on campus to the greatest extent possible? And then in your interpretation, there's certain cases where it is not possible. Or do we need to spell it? I don't think the board needs to spell that out. Unless I hear board members, I don't want to jump ahead of you.
So can I'm sorry, Chair, can we ask our Assistant Superintendent Armstrong to help with the language? Because I think it would be consistent with the health and safety guidance document.
Okay.
Okay. No, Chair Payne, I think your language is general and specific enough to cover a variety of situations in this document. So accepting special situations and accommodations for students who require close care. I think that's sufficient for this document, and if that close care needs to be spelled out elsewhere, we can definitely
Yeah.
do that.
I think giving you the flexibility to do that is what we want to do. So accepting special special needs students requiring close care. Okay. And then instead of at all times, to the greatest extent possible, leaving making that change, or seems a little more reasonable perhaps to do that. Just jump in. Don't wait for me to tell you. It's okay. All right. So then the mask, proper mask wearing, we can just leave that as it is, because proper mask wearing also includes the accommodations for students who are unable to wear masks. And then implement proper ventilation strategies as outlined in DOH guidance. I think this is one that Senator Schatz was particularly concerned about. Is that a reasonable, can you do this? Deputy Superintendent?
So we are working on that, implementing proper ventilation strategies as outlined in the DOH guidance. So the discussion, and again, this is to do with the different mitigation. So for instance, with schools that have closed air systems, we are working with the schools right now. And so it's something that we are committed to doing. We're not there yet. In figuring out exactly what each school system needs. So just want to make sure that that we are committed to it and we are working on a solution for every single school.
Okay. Moving on to number 4. We'll leave it in. Okay, yes, go ahead. Who's got their hand up over here? Kamina Bakarse, go ahead.
Well, hello, Chair Payne. Could you read back 3A? I not exactly sure where we landed. One of the concerns that I had with 3A is in certain schools where you have indoor hallways, I don't even think it's possible to pass in the hallway and still maintain that 6-foot distance at all times. So I really did like your change that listed whenever possible, but if you could read it back to make sure that it does clarify that.
I can do that, and I add to the greatest extent possible. So successfully implement and consistently enforce at least 6 feet physical distance between all individuals on campus to the greatest extent possible, excepting special needs students who require close care.
Mahalo, Chair. I yield.
Okay. Board Member Voss.
Yes, the same change on 3C, given the deputy superintendent's comments about some indoor areas, and we know we have some unique buildings in the state school system. So it should say 3C, implement to the greatest extent practicable proper ventilation strategies.
Yeah. Okay, so it reads implement to the greatest extent practicable proper ventilation strategies as outlined in the DOH guidance, page 10, for any indoor area on campus that will be occupied by more than one person. I think this is a really important one, however, and we need to keep circling back to this, because as we're learning about the science of transmission, I don't want us to get caught not being attentive to this. Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Board Chair. Board Member Takeno here. I have significant problems in amending 3C as suggested. If it's proper ventilation, then basically it is pretty much a safety standard, and we shouldn't compromise safety standards. If that's what the standard is, we need to abide by it. So I disagree to any amendments on 3C. We should just leave it as is, or else we'll be dealing with putting people in areas where we understand it's a safety hazard. And if they sustain an injury, we are going to be responsible ultimately because we allowed it. So I have great reservations under 3C. I yield the floor.
Okay, other comments on that one? Board Member Voss and Board Member Fallon? Board Member Voss, because he was responding to your change, do you have any comments there about putting it back because of what? Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize, Chair. Everything here is a balance. And I think we just heard from the Deputy Superintendent that they're working through these issues and making the best efforts. And I think, all schools and administrators are going to make their efforts to the greatest extent possible, practicable. And I don't want, as I've said before, anything in this to be deemed by a school as a reason why they can't open and deprive students of educational opportunities. So I still think to the greatest extent practicable is the best path forward here. But if others disagree, I respect it. Yes.
Okay, Board Member Fallon?
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Member Fallon. I'm okay with to the greatest extent possible. I do know, and this goes back to Dwight's comment that, for example, with A and B, there's specificity in the HSTA MOU that we adopted around distancing and wearing of protective gear, such as face covering. So I think to the greatest extent possible, doesn't violate those agreements and acknowledges that, there are situations where it's not possible because of physical limitations or the need of the student. So that's why I'm okay with to the greatest extent possible. If we want, we might want to add language that references, any laws or agreements, but I don't think that's really necessary. I yield.
It does reference the page number in the DOH guidance for reopening. Deputy Unibasami, go ahead.
So yeah, and I was just going to point out that page 10 in the DOH guidance talks specifically about ventilation. As we look at that, and the challenge is school by school, possibly every school can do some of these mitigation efforts, but not without some challenges. For instance, the reason that we created air conditioning in some of our schools was because of temperature. When we take a look at opening up the windows and circulation, then we create another challenge for the teachers and the students, which is now when it gets hot, it becomes challenging to learn and to teach. And if we leave the doors open and turn the air conditioner on, then we have an energy management issue. We know that when you leave the doors open for the ventilation and we leave the air conditioner on, the price tag goes up. And so as we take a look at this, and we look at the ventilation on page 10 of the document, while on its face, it seems reasonable, if you take a look at the context and what we're going to see in some of our classrooms, I just want to remind the board that we have been working very hard on trying to control temperatures also in the classroom. And so that dilemma of how do we balance, right, the needs of the safety plus the learning conditions in a school absolutely need to be thought about case by case. We have talked about opening the windows and increasing circulation. We've purchased air purifiers, especially for the Big Island, using the rest of our money that came from the volcano, the impact of the volcanoes in previous years, and we're looking at the possibility of buying more of that in order to support the rest of our schools. It comes with a price tag, but we are costing that out right now. And we are also looking at where we might need to upgrade our systems and prioritizing those schools that need that first because of they may have a closed air system. And so I do want you to know that we are thinking about it. We are purposeful about it. But the guidance that is in the DOH document, we probably can do. But however, it then it poses another challenge that is not identified in the guidance document. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I think there's no question that this whole experience has uncovered layers of complications that are difficult to address. And I don't think anybody on the board is suggesting that we close our schools until we fix this particular problem. But I think it is important to keep it there as showing our awareness, and also the Department of Health. It is part of their guidelines. What we could do is pull it out and vote on it separately. Is that something board members would like to do, or should we leave it in there? Excuse me. And add the words "to the greatest extent possible." Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Board Chair. In the interest of moving this along, I'm going to drop my objection.
Okay.
So we can move with Board Member Voss's recommendations.
And just add "to the greatest extent possible"?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Moving along to number 4. Principals must obtain approval from their respective CAS before transitioning their respective schools from distance learning to hybrid or in-person learning, or for hybrid learning to in-person learning. Any objection with that one? I think that kind of ties in with number 6, basically. So we're basically in agreement on that one. Principals seeking approval to transition their respective schools from distance learning to hybrid or in-person learning, or from hybrid learning to in-person learning, must demonstrate that the school can adequately implement COVID-19 mitigation strategies by the board, DOE, and applicable collective bargaining agreements within the anticipated number of students and staff that will be on campus in the instructional delivery mode. This is the one we discussed, the word "demonstrate," and I believe that we left that in there without specifying what that would look like, because it gives the department, it gives the schools opportunity to be flexible in their mode of demonstration. Any comments on that one? Okay, I have to, excuse me while I don't see any hands. So moving along to number 6. It seems to me that number 4 and number 6, we could cross out number 6 and just leave number 4. Number 6 is principals may transition their respective schools from in-person learning to hybrid or distance learning, or for hybrid learning to distance learning by notifying their respective CAS. And we already kind of crossed out the without approval and actually changed it to with approval of their respective CAS. And then it's pretty much the same as number 4. So do I have any objections to just crossing that one out completely? I think that one should have thought it. It's kind of similar. Okay, so I'm crossing that one out. Number 7, schools transitioning from one instructional delivery mode to another must provide families and school staff with at least 1 week notice And that was changed up with Phyllis's recommendation to 2 weeks notice before implementing the transition, unless the transition is in direct response to confirmed or potentially imminent COVID-19 spread in the school or surrounding community. Any comments on that one? Just the change to 2 weeks? While I check for hands. Okay. Okay, moving to number 8. And this one is where we deleted potentially, the word potentially, to reduce undue hardship on families, school staff. Schools should not change instructional delivery modes more than once within a 4-week period unless the change is in direct response to confirmed or imminent COVID-19 spread in the school or surrounding community. Comments there? We removed the word potential. Okay. Number 9, CASs are responsible for verifying the readiness of schools to provide safe learning environments and may approve schools' requests to transition from distance learning to hybrid or in-person learning, or from hybrid learning to in-person learning only if the school is requesting an instructional delivery mode that aligns with the learning model parameters in DOH guidance, is located in a county with an impact level of Act with Care, recovery, or new normal as categorized by the governor's recovery plan, provides sufficient evidence that it can adequately implement all COVID-19 mitigation strategies required by the board, the department, and applicable collective bargaining agreements with the anticipated number of students and staff that will be on campus in the new instructional delivery mode. And finally, D has not changed its instructional delivery mode in the last 4 weeks. Any comment on that one? See any comment there? Number 11, no, I'm sorry, number 10. The superintendent must order schools to quickly transition to distance learning if the impact level of the county in which they are located changes to safer at home or stay at home as categorized by the governor's recovery plan. Number 11, the superintendent may adopt or incorporate any other parts of DOH guidance into the reopening plan, principal handbook, or health and safety handbook as deemed necessary, provided that doing so does not conflict with the board's directives stated herein. Any issues with that one? Okay. And now we are at 12 and 13, which again are the more controversial of these. It was suggested, one suggestion was eliminate number 12 completely. Board Member Voss, go ahead. We had a couple of modifications and then or eliminate, but
Right.
go ahead.
And I have a suggestion as to 12, which I think will help accommodate some of the comments that Dwight made. My concern, and I think Maggie's concern, is about the no school may change its instructional delivery mode to hybrid. Basically, the schools can't change. I don't have any objection to the superintendent incorporating the board's directives in these documents. And as I understood, the deputy superintendent, neither did she. So I would suggest, and I want to make sure this is okay with the deputy superintendent, that simply say the superintendent shall incorporate the board's directives stated herein into the reopening plan, principal handbook, or health and safety handbook.
Feel free to weigh in, Phyllis.
Yeah, yes, and I think that the dilemma, and just to make sure that we're not stopping schools from doing the planning and the communicating that they've already done. That we in fact are saying that we are committed to ensuring that these directives are incorporated, but it does not in any way penalize schools that are moving forward with their school communities.
So what I am hearing from Board Member Voss is that we cross out everything up to the word superintendent and then say the superintendent shall incorporate, and then it continues the board's directive stated herein in the reopening plan. Is that correct? Go ahead, Board Member Voss.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the deputy superintendent. That is exactly the intent of my amendment, deputy superintendent, is that the schools may continue. The department will timely incorporate the board's directives in those documents, but it is not going to in any way delay plans that are appropriate. Are you?
Yes, and yes, and just to clarify, so now number 12 looks like the opening of the proposed motion. I'm just checking on that now.
And while she's checking on that, I got a note from people who are checking on us to tell me that in my reading of 4 and 6, they are not similar even, or they're not the same even when we made the changes, and that we might want to leave 6 in, but make the changes going back to requiring approval from respective CAS. So if, I think one is going from in-person learning to hybrid or distance learning, and the other one is going in the other direction. So we could change 6 by adding the approval of the CAS instead of just crossing it out. You know, everybody's a little exhausted here. But okay, Phyllis, you were checking on something?
Oh no, sorry. What I was saying was that I think the changes in number 12 look like the opening statement in the proposed motion on page 14.
This is Board Member Voss. Phyllis is right. It is actually redundant, and I apologize. I didn't see that in the preamble. So if you want to just simply eliminate 12, that would be fine with me as well.
Okay. Other members either agreeing or amending? Okay, seeing none. And we move to 13. Any thoughts on that one? That's the one that says the superintendent must request a rationale from DOH on how it determined its learning model parameters, including any scientific data on which it is based and an explanation of how it aligns with CDC indicators for dynamic school decision-making. And the superintendent must include the rationale in the reopening plan for the purposes of transparency and addressing public concerns. Okay, sorry, folks. I'm trying to read several things here. So do we leave 13 for Board Member Uemura, Vice Chair Uemura, followed by Board Member Voss?
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Vice Chair Uemura. I have no issues with 13, but if any member want to take it out, I would suggest that we have it as a separate request to have it done by the department. You have the floor.
Okay, Board Member Voss?
I was just going to say, similar to Ken, so long as the 12 is not there and if there's no limitation on the changing of instructional delivery mode, I don't have any problem with the intent of 13. So I'm actually fine with moving it in because it no longer creates a barrier if 12 is gone.
I think with 13, it's needing some assurance that decisions are being made based on scientific rationale, and that we can stand on the science that is giving us the real authority to make these decisions with confidence. So, okay, so if we leave that in there, and I'm sorry, 4 and 6, we can take, if we can go back, that's the thing about principals getting approval or not getting approval from their CASs to make changes. I think if we add into 4, I'm getting some language here that, sorry, I've got to look at this. If we just change 4 to say principals must obtain approval from their respective CAS before transitioning their respective schools from one instructional delivery mode to another. And that, I think, makes it much simpler. It gives the authority to the CASs to approve and takes some of that language out that was a little confusing. So if I don't hear any objections to that, we'll delete 6 and we'll amend 4 to basically what I just said. And now I need to see if there are any hands up. Okay. I see no other comments from board members, so this is a really long motion. I need to have somebody, we withdrew the other one, so we need to have a new motion. So is somebody willing to do that? Board Member Bakarse?
I move that the board adopt the positions and directives described in the proposed motion below as amended.
Board Member Takeno?
I second the motion.
All right, is there any further discussion? Is everybody clear on what we did with this? Board Member Bakarse, did you want to say anything else? Okay. All right, I'm going to take the vote. Excuse me, I have to find that paper. Hang on, folks. I apologize. I have lots of papers on it. Okay, I'm going to call the roll call vote. And my first board member, Vice Chair Uemura.
Aye.
Board Member Voss.
Aye.
Board Member Takeno.
Aye.
Board Member Bakarse.
Aye.
Board Member Nama'u.
Aye.
Board Member Fallon.
Aye.
Board Member Cox.
Aye.
And Board Member Asher.
Aye.
Okay, the motion has passed. And there being no further items to discuss and no further business, I am going to adjourn the meeting at 5:51. Still daylight, folks. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and participating.